Okay, I'm getting the message that the meeting is being live streamed. All right. That the meeting is being live streamed. All right, so we are live stream. I'm getting some from somewhere.
All right, you were breaking up and you look frozen again
So,
and okay. Oh yeah, we
um,
can't hear you. We can't hear you.
yeah, Commissioner Cummings is a member. Did she get the invitation?
I'm looking at the list and she never received that invitation. I don't see Chauncey listed.
Can you hear me now?
I'm looking at the list and she never received that invitation. I don't see Chauncey listed.
And she was not on the notice either.
Can you hear me? Okay, so we are going to move forward. We will deal with that. We will deal with that later. 2, 3, 5. Okay, we are going to move forward. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to leave my video off. I am not in the office, and I think that could be why my stability is a little it's unstable right now. So I will leave my video off. If we are now live streaming, we will handle the other matter after this meeting. But I think we are ready to go ahead and call to order. Did everyone receive an agenda?
Yes, I received an agenda.
I'm unclear about that.
Okay. So, Chair, Vice Chair Watts, I am ready to turn this over to you to go ahead and get in the notice. And all council members get the notice.
You you were breaking up. I heard ready to turn it over and something about a notice.
I got it.
Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. I am looking here and I'm following the agenda. So this is our strategic planning ad hoc work group, fiscal year 2025, 26 to 2028, 29. And so, if you will, we designed the structure of these meetings, hopefully to assist us with a swift and sufficient, efficient outcome of SMART goals. And so the purpose is to refine and finalize SMART goals for funding categories, kindergarten readiness, youth development, and family supports. And so we're going to try to accomplish this in a 4 meeting session. If you will remember, you all maybe like me, I had made an assumption that we had, goals. We were reporting data X, Y, and Z. And so after having a one-on-one with Sika, to try to go over, that strategic framework that we went over, that's when I realized that really we had never set goals and need goals for each of those categories that we all agreed upon as a council that we wanted to have an impact on, which are those funding categories. So what we thought we would start off with today for meeting one is to set that stage, that informal one-on-one I had with Sika to go over, what was all of the things we agreed upon. What does all that mean? To have a quick overview of that, which will then maybe help us set the stage of yes, we need SMART goals. What do we really want to focus on to try to move the needle, hold the council accountable and the team to really show forth any impacts or adjust those impacts X, Y, and Z. That's the strategy. And what I wanted to know, Holly, I'm calling you out, but are you able to share Okay, I didn't know if you were going to share the screen or share any of those documents that were in the pack. Okay, cool. All right.
Whenever you are ready, you let me know.
I am ready. I'm ready. So we can start off with let's start off with the review of the CSC Leon theory of change. Perfect.
Fantastic. Sika, given your connection issues, would you like me to go over the theory? Perfect. All right, everyone. I'm going to feel a little bit like repeat because we have just concluded 5 different trainings with potential grant seekers for our youth development OST. And we actually start all of our trainings with talking about our theory of change. Clearly, we have it large in our training room, as well as putting it on the screen. And if you recall, this was developed in partnership with Q&Q Research. And it starts just a little bit with our vision mission right over here. Our values that we adopted in 2020. Oh, goodness, that was November of 21. And these are our 3 priority areas. Ultimately, if we begin with the end in mind of wanting all children and youth being able to reach their full potential, we recognize by doing that, we have kind of these 8, I'm going to say really broad goals, but not SMART goals, right? These are our very, very broad goals that you'll see right here that we've divided into these 3 areas: success in school and life, healthy children, youth, and families, and stable and nurturing families and communities. Those broad goals are interrelated, as we discussed during our last strategic plan, and they layer on top of one another. We are assessing our impact by designing procurement specific outcomes and outcome measures, whether they're process measures or actual performance indicators. That our goal is that if we have enough saturation, that we'll be able to impact the information on a larger community scale. That is what the theory of change represents. You'll recall, and I don't have to jump into this, I'll pause right here. But you'll recall that through all of the procurements that we have done, we were able to kind of separate them into 4 different areas: kindergarten readiness, youth success, family well-being, and capacity building. Each of these do not fit perfectly into one of those pillars because they're so interrelated. In the same way that we've talked about kids arriving at kindergarten ready to learn, well, they can't do that if they have food insecurity or they're experiencing adverse childhood experiences. All of that kind of layers onto one another. So we've been able to look at all of the investments we've made to date and kind of put them in this way, which is a slightly different frame from the overarching theory of change. And I'll pause there if there are any questions about the theory of change or how we've kind of envisioned the data that we've collected or the investments that we've made thus far.
So I am going to interject really quickly. This reflects what is in the impact report. I want to be really clear about that, since there has seemed to be some concern about the impact report. This reflects what is in the impact report, and this is spot on to where our investments have been over the last 4 fiscal years.
So we thought we would start, Vice Chair or Chair Watts, since it's the committee, with just the next part of that impact report, which are some of the data points that we are looking at potentially influencing. The stars that you'll see here are representing all schools that are operating within our county and are not exclusive to Leon County schools. So I want to be very clear that Superintendent Hannah, you may be operating on a slightly different number because this is pulling in the other schools that are operating in our community, including FAMU DRS and Florida High. Yes, Mr. Watts. And by all means, you should, I shouldn't call on you. You should interrupt me.
Oh, no, you're good. I just want to reiterate this first bucket up here, success in school and life, right? This is one of the three categories that we voted on. That's not necessarily what we are perhaps trying to assign a SMART goal to, right?
That
Okay,
is correct.
so
Okay.
I'm going to jump in right here, Vice Chair Watts, if I can, because I should have started off by saying when we were at the theory of change, this council approved three priority areas: success in school and life, healthy children, youth, and families, stable and nurturing families and communities. When we look at that, there are the 8 impact areas that fall underneath each of those: 2 under success in school and life, 2 under the second, 2 under the third. But the way that we have addressed those is by creating 3 funding categories. And the 3 funding categories are kindergarten readiness, youth success or youth development, and family supports or family well-being. And then we have this capacity building piece at the bottom, which the council accepted we would need to do that in order to ensure we have a provider community that is able to meet the need that is out there. So when we are looking at the goals that we will draft, they will be in concert with the funding categories, not the priorities, because the priorities you agreed as a council, and this predates Mr. Johnson and Mrs. Richards. You agreed as a council that many of those priorities intersect. And so as we were trying to pull specific procurements to specific priorities, what we found is that it was easier and it made more sense to pull those procurements with the funding categories that naturally fell out of the priorities. So I felt like I needed to interject that because this strategic planning process will focus on the categories, and those categories feed into the overall theory of change.
Can you go back to that slide? And because this is what did help me. So again, so ultimately, yes, we're collect like they're reporting data, all the money they've been giving out and the services, and they would come back and report data, X, Y, and Z. It was just really reporting, but it wasn't necessarily anything to help us say, yes, we moved X, Y, and Z to this point. So this last bottom column up, I'm looking at kindergarten readiness, the third row down here, right? So we would be trying to, like today, establish coming up with a SMART goal for one of these bullet points. Is that fair?
That's probably a little more narrow. So
Okay.
the bottom part are just a few of the key outcome measures that are publicly sourced. So these are just a representation of those key outcome measures that are publicly sourced and that we use when we are developing the procurement, because the research says if we impact these key outcome areas, then we should see where we're funding get better. And get better could mean it increases what we want to increase or decrease what we want to decrease. So the key outcome measures are really more for our internal use as we are doing these procurements so that anybody publicly, when they look at the data, they can go look and say, oh, yeah, I see where this has improved. So I wouldn't focus so much on the key outcome areas, because remember, your SMART goal is going to be broad enough. And then we have strategies that the staff will come up with, our tactics and strategies that will help feed into that SMART goal. So using the history of where we funded, the data that is out there, then determining, okay, where is it that we want to focus to try to impact that particular area.
Okay.
Is that clear as mud or not?
I think it's clear and it's going to come together even more here. Keep going.
Yes. Okay.
So the reason, if I may, the reason why we wanted just to, again, that kind of overview review of the impact report was these were some of those select indicators within of those three pillars that we're tracking. We reported it in our needs assessment with like a baseline data point, and these could be the indicators that we are looking at. Again, pulling from that third row for each column, this is how we've been thinking about strategic planning for the community overall. We pulled out four indicators that are related to that pillar: kindergarten readiness, third grade reading, eighth grade math, juvenile crime. And we provided it for our baseline rate compared to the state rate for both where we started and where we're at most recently. And then just included a trend line to see just where we're seeing some progress. Again, there's no assumption here that the work that we have done thus far has made these needles move yet, because many of our investments are long-term investments. While we know that we might have had a positive impact on feeding because we made significant investment in the post-COVID space in the feeding area, that we've seen that shift a little. We also know that we've made significant investment in youth development, so we are hopeful that we're starting to have an impact on that third grade reading and eighth grade math and juvenile crime.
And
And
and if I can hold on, and if I can jump in again, while what Holly is saying is absolutely true, and it is because we don't have goals that help us to directly correlate from an anecdotal perspective. And I think the letter that Commissioner Proctor sent, I can't remember whether I forwarded it to you guys. No, you all should have received it. When he talks about, and I think it was to Chair Jones, when he talks about the increase in the school grades and those things, while we can't directly correlate, what we do know is well-fed children learn better. So it's the anecdotal, and that's what we want to move from, the anecdotal, and be able to take this data that we're collecting and direct it toward a goal for a time limit so that we can show, yes, what we're doing is feeding into the increase where we want and the decrease where we want.
So this is first pillar here, the second pillar of healthy children and youth. This is where we looked, the four that we've pulled out are low birth weight babies, self-harm among youth, teen suicide rates, and domestic violence incidents. Superintendent?
Yeah, Holly, can you go back a slide?
Yes, sir.
So, and I may have been involved in this. Who, these four areas, did the council select those four areas to measure, or who did that?
No, sir. So they were pulled out originally by Q&Q Research as just select indicators. And as we go on and start talking conception to career, one of our objectives today is to decide, are these the right ones or are they not the right ones? Is looking at it in this three kind of format the way we want to do it, or go to a different format. And so if you'll bear with me as we go through just kind of the slides, we're going to come to that exact question.
Okay.
Again, we pulled out low birth weight babies as an indicator of community or family health, self-harm among youth, which really coincided with the mental health objective that the council selected as one of its higher priorities. Again, teen suicide rates and domestic violence. In the third pillar, bless you, in the third pillar, you will see families in poverty, which as we go to the idea of conception to career, that's going to come up a lot. Food insecure children, neighborhood school safety. This is from the some work that the Department of Health does related to how safe children feel walking, or excuse me, feel going to school. So this is not a reflection of school safety indicators, but how safe youth feel. So it's specifically pulled from a youth behavior survey that is publicly available, as well as rates of child abuse and neglect. Again, this is what was reported in our annual report. And we will decide, here and today as we go through this strategic planning over the next 4 sessions, are these the right indicators that we want to be looking at? I'm going to take a pause and go back of what does this look like in our community if we break it down by zip code, because this really starts getting us to think about targeted supports. Given that currently our budget is less than $10 million a year, we know that we're not going to be able to impact everybody. So a lot of the work that we have done thus far has been targeting 5 key zip codes. And you can see them, the zip codes that we're targeting are listed right here. The 5, 32301, 32303, 32304, 32305, and 32310. This is the families in poverty. This corresponds, we could break it down by census tract as well, but for the most part, looking at it at the zip code level really corresponds with what you'll see in the final slide in this series. But we pulled families in poverty. So specifically, this is families that have children in their household 17 years of age or younger and are living in below or at that poverty threshold. Food insecurity, this is the number of households that are receiving or are eligible for SNAP benefits, specifically receiving SNAP benefits. Again, you can see the ones that are receiving it, it's those same 5 zip codes that we were talking about before. This information is also taken directly from the Census Bureau. We also pulled zip code data for the percentage of low birth weight babies. And the darker the number you'll see here is the higher the rate or the worse off that particular community is. You can see in this that it is not exclusive to zip codes because we started to have a little bit of interrelated shifting from the census tract. So it was more than just looking at those 5 zip codes. And we also know that low birth weight babies does not necessarily impact only families living in poverty, but you'll start to see where it shifts a little bit. But still, that northeast quadrant continues to be the least impacted. We also pulled gun deaths. So looking specifically at community violence and how many individuals were dying due to gun deaths as a proxy for neighborhood safety. Again, you see this massive shift where the Southwest, if you will, continues to be the areas of greatest concern. So we then wanted to say, okay, well, can we learn a little bit more if we were to target this? Could we look at this maybe by school district? So what you see here is all of the elementary school districts for Leon County schools and showing those that are Title I. I don't think that any of this will come as a surprise to anyone here, but all of these maps clearly follow a pattern. And when we dive into some of the kindergarten readiness information, you'll see that that pattern extends as we start talking about things like kindergarten readiness, 3rd grade reading. So we just wanted to kind of show that here. Now, one of the things we started talking about and as gaining a lot of traction with our community of providers is instead of just focusing on 0 to 3 or 0 to 5 or 0 to 8, that the work that we do is conceptualized along this timeline. We had previously been saying cradle to career, but clearly that forgets this very important section, and that's prenatal. And as we think through our growing trees, if you will, that even an acorn starts somewhere, and to get to that mighty oak, which is where we want them to be, it has to have several interventions along the way. It can't just be put it in the ground and water it, right, in that 0 to 3 space, and then it's going to grow into the mighty oak. It has to continue to have a supportive environment, sometimes those scaffolding and supports so that it grows up. So what we have done here is taken that timeline of our potential opportunities for intervention in the life of a child from conception to career and identified potential data points along the way that we could consider as measurements or proxies for our success. You'll see that families in poverty and domestic violence is going to kind of be woven throughout this timeline of conception to career because it could be a proxy at any point of family health or community health. So starting with low birth weight babies and maternal mortality, that's something that we are focused on currently as it relates to the investments with Healthy Start Coalition and our Perinatal Navigator program. If we continue on to early childhood, which is more of that birth to age 3, looking at infant mortality, which is determined by 12 months of age, potentially well child visit compliance. It could be immunization rates. Again, you'll see up here, families in poverty, food insecurity, things of that nature that we may want to focus in that early childhood phase. It could be how many families are receiving WIC benefits. There's a lot of data points that are out there. When we get to preschool, that's really looking at that kind of 3 to 5 space. A success of that space would really be measured by kindergarten readiness, which is measured around day 30 of enrollment in kindergarten. We could also pull up pre-K participation rates, child abuse and neglect. Again, families in poverty, we can break that number down within the census tract by age range of the child. So we can really hone in and look at some of those data points. Early elementary, and we make a distinction when we're doing our work with youth development programs of K through 2 versus 3 through 5, because that really is in the K through 2 space. The superintendent will be very familiar with this, and as probably Ms. Richards, you are as well, being a former educator, that in the early elementary space, you are learning to read, whereas in the 3 to 5 space, you're reading to learn. So that's why we've kind of drawn a distinction and looking at the quality supports and curricula that our programs are using and making sure that they're being very distinct in the implementation science of the work that they do. So in that early elementary space, some of the indicators that you could be looking at: 3rd grade reading, access to after school, child abuse and neglect, families in poverty. And you can see that there are blanks along all of these because we have lots of data indicators. So as you're going on the journey to choose your SMART goals, you can pick and choose where you might want to place them. And then as we continue on the timeline, elementary age being that kind of grades 3 through 5, this is really where looking potentially at school absenteeism as an outcome that we potentially want to impact. Again, access to after school. This is around the time, 4th and 5th grade, that we really start looking at juvenile justice involvement, systems involvement for juvenile crime. The middle school age range of, again, that's going to be our pretty set forward, grades 6 through 8. Potentially looking at 8th grade math rates, again, school absenteeism, but this is where we start seeing the spikes in our self-harm behavior amongst youth and some of the mental health concerns that we have. This is also where the census starts really tracking feelings of safety from the youth themselves, and again, keeping tabs on the juvenile justice by age range. Again, the Department of Juvenile Justice provides that by age kind of range once the youth is 10 years old. The second to last kind of phase on our journey to career is high school. Looking at high school graduation rates, potentially the FAFSA completion rates, which is, I'm going to get this, the federal access. I think it's, the superintendent probably knows the acronym better than I do, but in essence, it's completing the application for federal school aid. Just getting that done, that's something we want to look at. Again, school absenteeism. We could start looking at teen birth rate. industry certifications, the teen suicide rate, again, neighborhood safety and juvenile justice for that higher age range of 15 to 18. And then this last phase of young adult, this is our 18 to 24. We know that, supports don't just stop when you're 18. While maybe a lot of the work that we're doing might stop there. The council did make the decision early on back in 2021 to continue to define youth as up to age 24 to allow for other inputs and supports should they be needed, especially for children that might be transitioning out of care or might have those special needs. But this is where we could look at potentially repeat teen birth rates, labor force participation, or the median wages specifically of the 18 to 24 age group. The Department of Labor provides statistics on that. They also provide statistics on the young adult poverty rate as well as the young adult suicide rate. So these are all potential data points that we could look at along the way as you are thinking through to develop your as you're thinking through and developing your expectations for a SMART goal. I'm going to pause here to see if there's any questions or thoughts, especially on this timeline, and turn it back over to Sika before we dive into the specifics about kindergarten readiness.
Brent?
Yeah,
Mr. Johnson, I'm sorry.
that's fine. I applaud this. This is really helpful to me, but I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that this really looks at a macro level at our community as a whole. And you could reach some wrong conclusions by looking at investments that the CSC makes in either not moving a needle or, on the contrary, moving a needle and taking credit for something. There are so many other entities that are making investments into these areas that unless we knew what the cumulative investments in our targeted areas are and targeted, whether it's school districts or census areas, you're really shooting a shotgun at this as opposed to being more focused, and you could make some wrong investment decisions along the way. So, I'm bringing up some conceptual changes in the way that we look at this that to me go back potentially to the original needs assessment data, and the way that there was an initial attempt to capture all of those nonprofit entities that are making investments, state or nonprofit entities, state, local nonprofit entities that are making investments in these particular areas, of which we may just be a small part. So I raised the question of, to the other ad hoc committee members, just, I don't know how to do this and make it specific to the CSC unless our data gathering inputs to this look at who else is out there or who else should be out there making investments in these respective areas.
So first of all, thank you for that, Mr. Johnson. And just for full transparency, this is a conversation that Councilmember Johnson and I have had a couple times. And I think that it is definitely a good point. So now's probably a good time for me to admit that I changed our focus to this conception to career. That was 100% me. And the reason that we wanted to present it this way is because our council, as diverse as it has been very good at looking at not just that early childhood space, but all of the spaces in between. And so one of the efforts that our team would like to propose at some point, maybe not before the end of the year, but definitely into next year, is creating this conception to career continuum work group. So rather than looking at just kindergarten readiness, we look at the conception to career and try to bring everyone together so that we are mapping that conception to career, how it would look in a perfect world, how we would want a conceived child to go through their process of maturation, getting all the way to that college or career, and then inserting in there where each of our nonprofits or funding entities are putting their money. Where is it that you are inserting? What is that data? And then looking at where we insert as well, so that we are all together in the struggle, if you will, regarding ensuring that every child born in Leon County has what they need to reach their greatness. It would have been great to do that initially, right? It would have been wonderful for us to start off that way. But I think these are lessons that we've learned. I can speak for myself, lessons that we've learned during the 4 years that we've been funding and during the 5 years that we have been established, working with Leon County, working with the city of Tallahassee, working with the United Way of the Big Bend. And then in December, you're going to hear a presentation from 211 Big Bend, which is a whole nother piece of this. So I don't think that effort or that conversation, let me say this, I don't think we have to wait on where we want to impact, because there are certain things that we know for sure needs our assistance, and that we feel fairly confident that we kind of know what's going on in that area. And I think we've shown that in some of the work that we've done. That being said, though, uh, it, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Brent, but given our conversations, it could be time for someone, some entity, to truly take on that larger uh, needs assessment, or that larger convening, or that larger look at what really is happening. Because even with Q and Q, with QQ research and what they did, and they did, I believe, as good a job as they could have done in a 9-month period. I mean, they did this all in 9 months. These types of evaluations usually take a year to get in, and then another 3 to 6 months to put it all together. So it probably is time for us to relook at that, and then determine how deep we want to go. I mean, that was a 200 and, Holly, what did it end up being? About 250, 225. We had allocated
287.
300 and 229,
287.
287. So it came in a little bit less than what we had allocated. And I will tell you, we went in to get some quotes on what an update would look like. So we're still talking about $250,000, so it's not a cheap undertaking. But to your point, um, Brent, it's something that we need to look at doing. However, we can't wait on our SMART goals and looking at where we want to be to get that done, because that's of course an overall council decision as to whether we want to take that on. I will tell you, I would love for us to take on the conception to career and take that on and bring our organizations together. And it's not something that would be quick, but it will give us a true depiction of what our children need from the time they are conceived till the time we let them go and decide whether they're going to college or whether they're going into the workforce. Go ahead, Brent.
Well, I was just going to say that I, I think we need to be careful in that we can commit all our money and then get smarter and go, wow, I wish we would have changed course 2 years ago or a year ago, but I can't right now because I played bank all that I can play bank, and I'm exaggerating to make the point. I mean, I think the conception career model from one person's perspective makes a lot of sense, but just even looking at that, there are a lot of other entities, uh, you know, Rocky and the school system being a huge one, that are making investments in a lot of these areas once they get into the, K to 12 realm, that they're making to try to move things there. And unless we can calibrate who's doing what, you won't find where the gap is where we could optimize our investments. And I would say the same thing about investments that we've previously made in Second Harvest. Uh, Hearing and seeing investments that United Way is making in some of these areas, unless we know where those major investments are. We may not need to know where a single food truck is going through a particular high risk neighborhood that has food insecurity, but we need to know where the major investments are being made and what part we are making in those, or whether we should be making investments in those areas or not. Um, and I'll stop after this, but if I link it back to the way we've stated our mission and vision, we're a catalyst for change. And to be able to be that catalyst of change in our community, I think we need to know exactly what's being done right now, and that we're making informed decisions about how to make investments to be that catalyst. Part of it may be we're the data aggregator to help all providers see where investments are being made in these areas of need. I'm done for now.
Can I propose, and Mr. Johnson, that was they're great points, very valid points. I think we've had some of those conversations as well before. I don't know exactly how that ties into even the decisions we made where we wouldn't, considering all the other nonprofits and possible movements out there that are trying to move the needle in these areas, that, I think we had agreed to, or maybe it's even by law, that even our funding, right? So like before we even decide to fund something, I think the team is doing research, right? What already exists out there, to make sure that we're not duplicating, but if so, like we're enhancing. So it's got to be something different. I think that if we keep going, because you are absolutely right. I think once we get into this first proposed SMART goal, we're gonna be able to tie back to your comments as well, Mr. Johnson. Go ahead, Allie.
I kind of want to piggyback off of what Brent said, because I mentioned this at I think I talked to Holly about this for a little bit at after the last CSC meeting. And I was just saying, like, it would be helpful to have a map of like the services we provided, but maybe we need a larger map of the services that are provided in that area. Because we were talking about Griffin Heights and the FRC there, like what services are in that area and how many and how often. And I feel like that is really crucial for us to be able to determine what services go where, and even be able to, make that type of change in our community. If we're just replicating services, a lot of these students need multiple services. So I'm not saying that we don't need to be putting multiple services in the same zip codes, but I think we really do need to be looking at what services are being provided where. And I come back to like my two communities that in the rural areas that I serve, Fort Braden and Woodville. No grocery store. There's no grocery store in either one of them. They're not the first place that, the CSE is looking to put services at. They are, we have an FRC, which is wonderful in Fort Braden, and that's provided so many opportunities to families out there that they would have never had access to, simply because they don't have transportation to city limits and these types of places. And so I just think I'm going to go back to like the map of services, and maybe I was even wasn't pinpointing it correctly when I was talking about it with you, Holly. Maybe we need to be looking at the services provided in the zip codes and areas across the board, even the ones that we don't fund, to see what is where and how we can come in as this entity and really effectuate change across the county. That's it.
And to add on to that, that is great, Ms. Richards. Even when we come up with these potential SMART goals, so maybe this is for Sika Holly, these proposed SMART goals, will they have some methodology attached to them where it's not broad just for Leon County? Like, will there be, do you get what I'm saying? Like, to
Yes,
some
I
of Ms.
do.
Richards' point. So if it is that we're going to say we're going to do X, Y, and Z by whatever, there's some methodology where, okay, we have the ability to say we're going to focus on this zip code because based on our research in this zip code, this is what exists, this is what doesn't exist.
Right.
And okay, go ahead. I see you nodding your head.
Yes. So our SMART goals cannot be so broad that they cover the entire county. They just can't. We don't have that kind of money, to be very honest. So it's about looking at the continuum, knowing where there are definitely gaps and what we do. So let me pause right there. Looking at the continuum, knowing where there are gaps. And before we do any procurement, we are looking at what is currently being done. Because of course our needs assessment is back in 22, and even that data was for 21. So we're looking at what is currently done in our target areas. Our SMART goals are going to have to be broad yet specific. So, for example, if we want to look at school success, and we know that Title I schools are those schools that are disproportionately affected by all the social determinants of health and all of the things. So we might look at a SMART goal that targets Title I schools in a specific zip code. We want to increase, I'm just going to throw this out there. We want to increase the kindergarten readiness rate by 10% by 2029 in Title I schools in these target elementary schools. So we wouldn't be talking about all Title I schools. We'd be talking about elementary schools in this particular zip code, because we know that if we are able to increase the kindergarten readiness rate, specific school, then ultimately the rate is going to increase in that area.
So,
So that's an example of the specificity yet broadness that we would be looking at our goals.
so if we pause right there with that example, and then to Brent and Allie's point, right? So Superintendent Hannah likely has efforts as well where that's a goal in his schools. So then how would if the CSC set that as your example as a SMART goal, what would be the mechanism where we're assessing that this already exists, trying to
Well,
move this target, and where
yeah.
okay.
So we're looking at what we've already funded, what we already have in that area, and we're working with the school district to see what they already have in that area. And then we are suggesting a program, a funding, a whatever that fills the gap. If it's a school that has enough resources in it, and I see the superintendent's hand because he's definitely a part of this, but if it's a school that seems to have enough resources in it, and things still aren't moving, then that's a conversation. What is missing? We talk about what's missing and what we need to do. So it's not just, we're just going to do it in this school. It's the concert of all of the people that are at the table, which is one of the reasons why the superintendent is on the council, to be able to give us that information.
Oh, go ahead, Superintendent.
So we are not in this space, and we're in this space at a very low level, just with students with disabilities and some VPK kids, and which is why this was a major priority of mine when it came to the council was to try to engage with Healthy Start, Early Learning Coalition, and the other folks that are Head Start, and the other folks that are in this space with, 1, 2, 3, 4-year-olds to increase those kindergarten readiness scores. And I just, I love the conception to career, but it's very broad. It's 19 years of life, from conception to career. And like I've said many times to this council, $9 million, although it sounds like a lot of money, does not go a long way at the end of the day. And I am a simple person. This is the amount of time, energy, effort, and intelligence that went into this plan is unbelievable. I mean, Sika, you and Holly and your team, I mean, it's just amazing, but it's so much for me because I guess I'm just a simple-minded person that if we invested really heavily in all of those early learning programs, that the measure would be kindergarten readiness scores. I mean, to me, it's just that simple. And kindergarten readiness scores would go from wherever they are now. And another question, I don't know where you get your data from, but they would go, let's say if they're at 48 or 49, that we would see 55, 60, 64, 70. That those investments in all of those programs for children from the age of 0 to 5, we would then see that benefit. I don't know how you wrangle with an entire lot, 18 and 19 years of a child's life. There's so much involved in that. And we after they get to us, we got them. I mean, but it's before they get to us that we're really looking to move the needle on the achievement gap. And to your point, in some of these Title I schools, like you've heard before from Carmen, Connor, and others, 20% of kids or less are prepared. Most are woefully unprepared, and we spend the next 12 years trying to get them caught up. So, I don't know a better indicator that we could have in measurement other than kindergarten readiness scores. And the school district just does not have resources to be in that space. And we're not funded. The only students we're funded for are students that are diagnosed with disabilities.
Ms. Richards?
I may be getting ahead of myself, but or ahead of you guys. Do we track students individually that we serve? We
We
follow
have
students
through
individually?
SAMUS, right,
Yeah.
through our services and
Okay.
activities. So we do track them. We are doing that now through report card data, progress monitoring data. We're working on a data sharing agreement with the schools. But yes, we do.
Okay.
All right. Holly, Sika, you guys can keep moving forward. And then I think all of these discussions as well so far is going to lead to where we're going, I think. So, okay.
All right. So Holly, we can move into the next piece.
Sure. One of the things that we wanted to do when we're thinking about where we're placing, I have up on the screen right now the school districts and their current kindergarten readiness scores as measured by the state administered FAST STAR assessment, which is what is publicly reported as kindergarten readiness. That may or may not be the methodology that you want to use. We could certainly look at things like school grades or gains from year to year, depending upon where you want to look. But typically, when we're looking and comparing our community to other communities in the state of Florida, we are looking at that state-administered FAST STAR assessment, which is looking at how many, the percentage of children who score a 707, that's the current kind of threshold, or higher. We've also in this last year started looking at that information even in our pre-K4 classrooms, so our VPK classrooms, to see how well those pre-K programs are preparing students for kindergarten as well, and using that consistent state administered tool. So what you see on the screen here is each school district, and there's a couple that are Title I that are not in the red. And in just a minute, I'll drop in the chat a file that gives the breakdown of kindergarten readiness, third grade reading, as well as school absenteeism, and using our kind of red, yellow, green. It'll have it for every school that's in Leon County, but this map is only showing the public schools, not any of the charter schools or FAMU DRS or Florida High. So it's just as it's reported by school. One of the things that we've talked about doing is looking at those. This is just a snapshot. This is just the most recent data. Comparing the map of over the past 3 years and how this has changed and where we're seeing some growth. So I'm going to specifically point at Bond and Hartsfield. Since inception to where we are currently, they have crept up when it comes to kindergarten readiness. And then it's a matter of meeting with the programs that are operating in those areas, or determining from the data that we have from their kindergarten profiles, where did those individuals go to preschool? Could this be an influence of the influx of supports from South City Foundation impacting Hartsfield? Could that be related to the pre-K3 and pre-K4 classrooms that the school is operating? Could this be related to early Head Start and Head Start, who have been primarily focusing or has a focus in these two areas? But we've also seen that Appalachia, right over here, that elementary catchment zone has actually decreased over time. When we look at, and I think that this is to Superintendent Hannah's point, when we then look at third grade reading, what we saw previously when we started this work was that the gap that exists at kindergarten pretty much stays through third grade. And we're actually starting to see that shift. So to support what the superintendent said is like, get them to kindergarten, make them as like strong and as best as possible, and then we'll kind of take it from there and start really layering in those supports. We've also made very specific investments over the last 3 years to try to mitigate summer slide in those areas, and we're actually seeing that change over the last 3 years. To Mr. Johnson's point, can we take credit for all of that? Absolutely not. We can't. We know that there's a lot of other things that are happening there. I mean, look at Sable Palm, for example, where while we're serving a lot of kids in the Sable Palm catchment zone, most of our kids are not coming from there. And I can easily pull up the map and show you to Ms. Richards' point, to show you kind of like who and where we're serving. It's not primarily in that area because they have those additional supports. But we do see here that when we're looking at kindergarten readiness to third grade reading, is that really the measure that we're trying to get to so that this entire map becomes green? If we, and the reason why I bring this up is specifically around, I think it's Hartsfield again, and it could just be, according to my conversations with their principal, that the investments made at kindergarten that is resulting in this turning green, or excuse me, turning yellow. When we get to third grade, it is falling off, but it might just not have caught up yet. Again, these changes take time, and this is a great example of seeing that. You can clearly see here that there is progress being made by third grade. So making the decision where you want to target, how you want to target, is really where we want to kind of start. So I say that to then share, and I was taking notes while you guys were talking, that if we wanted to get to a SMART goal around kindergarten readiness, it could look something like this, that you want to increase. What are you trying to increase? Where specifically are you targeting? What's the gain that you want to see? I wrote 5 instead of 10. Sika, I think you said 10. I just wrote 5. By a date certain. how are you measuring it, right? And then through potentially what strategies. Our goal is that if the council gives this directive, then the strategies that the team develops, right, reflects this, and that any investments that we're going to use kindergarten readiness dollars needs to fit in here. Now, I just threw some things that were out there in the conversation based on the work that we're doing. We could also throw housing in here as well. And then the final thing, this is just if you wanted to adopt 2 or 3, just big kind of broad brush strokes that you could be also looking at those early supports, right? Looking specifically at some midpoint goals around low birth weight babies, looking at positive parenting and child bonding or PCI, that parent-child interaction as measured by reduced verified child maltreatment. So those are just some other areas that we can get into. We just wanted to share a little bit of the data, and I do see that a hand popped up, but the last thing I'll share is this is where learning from other CSCs has been very, very impactful. We're already working and know about strategies in that 0 to 5 space that could truly move the needle, so to speak, if we are very targeted in what we're trying to do. And that's why we adopted results-based accountability, because we know that we can't change everyone's lives, but only the lives of those families that we serve. So part of something that we're doing as we move forward in each of our procurements is carving out a percentage of that so that we're able to do that evaluative work. And our kind of first example is with the youth development stuff, our investments that we're going to be making next year as to create kind of a comparison group. Are those children that are receiving services in our programs better off than those children not in our services, and kind of creating that like group? This directly goes to the points that Mr. Johnson was making, and that would be expressed in the strategies that you adopt to support your SMART goals.
Thanks so much, Holly. And I'm going to turn it back over to Vice Chair Watts to kind of start this discussion. Let me say that we drafted some SMART goals just as a start, because sometimes it's easier to look at something and then tweak it versus trying to come up with it just out of the air. So that's the first thing. The second thing I will say, I do not suggest adopting more than 2. I do not suggest adopting more than 2, especially given Councilmember Johnson's and Councilmember Richards' comments regarding understanding where other services are, because there's some work that I think the council will adopt for us in that space. That being said, though, I think that we can look at specific areas where we know we can have an impact, have had an impact as we do that other work. So back to you to facilitate, Vice Chair Watts.
Appreciate it. Holly, can you go to the next one and then another one? Next one. These are all the 3 drafted ones, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so I did take a few notes, but I want to take into consideration all the comments just made. So even if we can use the first one as an example. Because here's the deal. You have multiple agencies, my agency included, folks who are doing the work and capturing data have, measures to meet, which, so I don't know how it all makes sense to me, but I don't know how
I'm
you get
just
to that.
I mean,
So
they
I
all
think I
tie
know.
together. So, I mean, unless we really get,
Well, I think I know the question you're asking. So what I don't think I said in the beginning is we realize, and I think this council has focused from the beginning, that it is about the collaboration, because we cannot fund every program, even in this kindergarten readiness space, to ensure that our kids get where we want them to be. But in concert and in collaboration with other organizations, we all can kind of feed into the changes that we're looking to achieve. This is why we work so closely with the ELC and work closely with Healthy Start so that we are looking at what they're doing and is it an expansion? We've done a lot of work in expansion. Is it an expansion of the services they provide, or is it the creation of something new? I think that when we talk about this particular draft SMART goal, we say programming in collaboration with key partners. So it's looking at what they're doing and where the data sits and what is it that we can do to help enhance what they're doing, or do we need to create something that bridges a bit of a gap there? Did I get to what?
Yeah. So before I go to you, Miss Richards. So let's use a real life example right now. We funded whatever several $1 million to Capital Area Healthy Start. Okay. Like I read them in this potential draft. So we fund them $1 million to do X, Y, and Z, and we want to capture that data. How do we separate that? We had an impact, and that $1 million had an impact
Well, we
towards our
capture
goal.
it.
Okay.
So from their reporting, they were very clear that more than 700 women who they would not have been able to serve were served with our funding, and then the data points that go along with that. So while they have the COAST program that they were funded to serve, they can only reach a certain number of expectant parents. With our funding, they were able to reach 735 more that screened into their services and that will now get those services. So that is where uh, our SAMIS software comes into play, because we have each one of those moms that are funded through our money in that program. So that's an example of the expansion of and how we know that our funding served this many more moms, and in concert with that, the outcomes for those moms as well.
Go ahead, Miss Richards.
Okay, so we do we track students that are or families that are being funded through, for example, Capital Area Health Start? Do we track those families in SAMIS?
So we will, yes,
We
And
are.
you'll track those
because
students.
once we get them, we now have them.
Okay, so why can't we just make a measurable goal of looking at just our students that we're tracking? Does that make sense?
You
Am I
could.
making sense? Like, can't we have a, like, if we're looking at Title I elementary schools, well, there's a lot of factors that go into a student's success in Title I elementary schools. We gave proclamation to school yesterday that went from a D to an A, and that was not all CSC. Like, that has a lot to do with leadership. That has a lot to do with, community investment. And so if within those schools we have students that we're serving and they're in SAMIS, shouldn't we just be looking at what we have in SAMIS?
Well, yes, but okay, so this is for you all to decide. Do you want the goal to specifically be our funding, or do you want the goal to be the larger goal and we have a piece of that? So that's for you guys to decide whether you want our goals to just be specific to our funding, and then with that specificity, we can then extrapolate into how it fits into the school's performance or the student's performance. Or you talk about the schools, then target the schools, and then look at our funding. So that's really a decision for you guys to make.
We do have a way to look at, though, we do have like all of this list of key partners here. The information they gives the information they give to us is specific to students and families, and we do track that, correct?
Yes. So if we partner with them,
Okay.
When we
Just some
track
more.
any funding that we provide for specific families or students, yes.
Do we track only the people that are funding touched? Do we track all the people that they touch?
We track our funding.
Okay.
We can ask them,
Yeah, yeah.
but we track our funding, yes.
I'm just wondering if we could, and I don't know where the consensus is with the board here, but I'm wondering if we can, if we eliminate those other questions by focusing in on the people that we serve and our goals go from this broad goal to a percentage of students that, I'm not certain how kindergarten readiness is measured, but like I'm thinking of like their testing scores, their STAR testing. I know it's not STAR anymore. But if you had like a percentage of students that showed growth over a year and we were using their STAR testing to track that, then we would just be looking at the students that our services or the children and families that our services have served. That's it.
So yes, understand. Let me give you an example. So rebound and recovery, the way they were able to determine was they looked at those assessments that the school provided. And so they brought in their services. They looked at the assessment at the beginning, whenever that assessment, Holly, help me with the name.
It is the fast star assessment that is
Fast
still
Star,
being administered. Oh, no, you're talking about teaching strategies gold
teaching
and the class
strategies
observation.
goals. Yes. And so they used that. And then by the end, they looked at that second one, and that's how they could measure. So it was something that was widely available. So I think that's very similar to what you're suggesting.
It, and I saw Mr. Johnson with his hand raised. So Sika, use that. Let's use the rebound and recovery. If we had a SMART goal established while we were funding them, right? Then the rebound and recovery would easily have had data where we would be able to target specifically the CSC funding of recovery and rebound did X, Y, and Z.
Well, we were able to do that because that's how they looked at. The only thing we were not able to do with rebound and recovery was the individual student, but that's what we're working on in the next iteration is being able to get those individual students. But from my perspective, and I could be wrong, my perspective would be you wouldn't have a SMART goal specifically about a rebound and recovery. Rebound and recovery would be a program that feeds into the SMART goal about kindergarten readiness because we know that emoting is a part of it. So when you're talking about the emotional health, so you could have several programs that feed into the one goal.
Mr. Johnson, did you have something? Oh, I'm sorry, Miss Virtue. I'll come back to you next. Just want to make sure.
Because I was tracking what Allie was wanting to ask about how Samus was captured, but I'm still not sure that we're there because if a mother was identified in the perinatal navigator program and she gave birth, we're tracking in Samus that we had contact with that mother, she gave birth to a child, but then it's, what is it, 5 years then about when the school system gets that child and where else have they been touched so that we're going to then
Follow them.
Right.
yeah, you've got to
Yeah,
follow
that's
them.
the issue.
Well, and
Mhm.
if they've been in our programs, we can follow them. Now, if they dropped off and they were served
Right.
somewhere else or not served, then they pick back up in the school system. We're doing a program in that school and we are able to flag them. You're right. We won't know what happens in between birth and them attending school. But the idea with the perinatal navigator program, which I think Chris discussed, is once they get into that perinatal navigator program, there is a link with some part of that program that seems to continue, whether it's the doula, whether it's the navigator, whether it's if they were connected with the Family Resource Center, so that there is always a piece that goes with them. We can't mandate, and I know you guys know this, but I'm saying it more for the public record. We can't mandate that somebody stays with us, right? We give them the service, and our hope is that that connection stays with them, but they could decide, our programs are voluntary. They could decide they pull out, they move away, then all of a sudden they move back, and now they pop up on the screen when they get enrolled in school. So I think your point is a good point, in that we can only follow those students and those families that stay with us.
I know Miss Richards has her hand up, but just as an extension for what Sika is saying, the perinatal navigator program, they enter here. They do enter the mom's details into SAMUS. When the child is born, they kind of go into this phase and they are entering the details of that child into SAMUS. At this juncture, we are not collecting social security numbers. That's not something that we have asked for, but we are collecting date of birth, their first name, last name, and of course their zip code, which is what we have been talking about doing our matching with the other program providers. They 82% so far of those 735 women that Sika mentioned earlier from Capital Area Healthy Start are being connected to a more intensive service provider, whether that's home visiting through Healthy Families or Healthy Start, or referred on to mental health supports. So we've talked about how do we have a stronger connection and partnership with those, but in that kind of transfer, there's a consent to share, so that we can follow up with those home visiting and mental health providers to see, like, are they staying engaged? And part of that consent to share, before we close them out of the program, will be an invitation to stay connected and follow them post service delivery. So post when they kind of leave the perinatal navigator program when baby is 12 months old. We have not hit baby turning 12 months old for any of the clients yet that they are serving. The idea is to keep connected to them though until they're 3, and maybe at that point of 3 that they're entering into this phase of preschool. And then getting them into services, whether that's through the Early Learning Coalition and expanded access to childcare for those ALICE families that we're targeting, or it's going in directly into the school-based system or in that partnership with the Early Learning Coalition. And again, that consent to share, that the idea is to then track them with the Early Learning Coalition or Head Start, Early Head Start. Then they get to kindergarten, and hopefully if we've been tracking them in each of those phases, when they get here to early elementary, that's when that partnership with the school district will really come into play. And hopefully with the personally identifying information that we do have, that we're able to track them along in this kind of community information exchange, kind of broad idea of being able to track a family. So I pulled that up as Sika was saying, because I think it shows you where we could have a touch and how even that prenatal investment, the intention of where we might touch the family, not directly through the Healthy Start investment, but through other partnerships and or investments as they get along.
I think something clicked for me. I hope I don't lose it. Miss Richards.
Go ahead, Chair Watts. You can go ahead.
Okay, go back to the draft. Holly, if you would, please, to the draft goals you have. Okay. So, to Mr. Johnson's point of view, Ms. Richards' point of view, when I read this, increase Leon County's kindergarten readiness rate in Title I elementary schools by at least 5 percentage points. I do have a question about that. By 2029, as measured by the state administered Fast Star assessment through expanded prenatal supports, strengthened pre-K programming in collaboration with key partners, and increased access to stable childcare for ALICE families. Let's say we even entertain that as a SMART goal. So then you would first need to with prenatal supports have an assessment of what prenatal support programs exist in the Title I elementary school areas. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you the team would do an assessment of all of what exists as far as prenatal supports, and then that would then drive what you all come up with or propose to us as something different,
or
innovative.
expanded. So it could be different or it could be expanded. So that is where our team goes in and we have these conversations. We have conversations, we get data, we look at the programs they're already running. And in some cases, and ELC is a perfect example, we can serve these. Who we can't serve are these. If we could serve these, and Alice, for example, and this would be a good place for me to say this. Yes, the eligibility criteria for school readiness expanded, meaning that now you are able, they will be able to catch some of those Alice families, but there will be other Alice families that they can't catch. And the funding available didn't necessarily increase along with the expansion of the eligibility criteria. So there could still be populations that won't be able to access early childhood because they again just miss whatever that catchment is. But back to my point. So we talk with these entities, many of the ones that are listed here, to determine this is where we as a team feel like CSC could come in and make a difference. And that is how we create these possible programmings and procurements to bring back to you with the, as you know, when we do it, we give you the research, we give you the rationale, we give you all of that for you all to consider to feed into the accomplishment of this goal.
It's prenatal. Stay here for a second. Prenatal supports, even the expanding. So then you do an assessment of all the Title I school areas and what prenatal supports exist. And then you do an assessment of those prenatal supports programs to include determining what their goals are, like what data.
What their data is, what their
Uh-huh.
goals are, if they're
Okay.
being successful, if there's a piece, I'm going to take it down to this level.
Uh-huh.
If there is a piece that if we funded a piece of what they're doing or an addition to what they're doing, maybe that would increase their outcomes. So there are a lot of possibilities in this.
How do you narrow okay, so to Miss Richards and Mr. Johnson's point of view, like we have all these programs out here, do you feel confident if this was a goal about expanding prenatal supports, that you would be able to come up with some type of methodology that would absolutely separate how we move the needle from our decision to fund a particular program and or not? Did that make any sense?
It does make sense, but I think the bigger thing to understand is that moving the needle takes time.
Sure,
So
sure.
with that, yes, if we are providing funding because we require data, we require names, we have a whole system that the program has to agree to use, we can then make the correlation that because we funded this, we saw this increase, therefore our funding led to the increase and in the goal. But our funding would be up. So I think what you're asking is, can you definitively say because CSC put their money in there, this goal was increased? And yes, for that portion of the students or babies or moms that we serve. And the idea is if we increase, then the number increases. Now, what that does not take into consideration is anything in the atmosphere of the universe that happens that over which we have no control. So, for example, the government shuts down and Head Start doesn't have any funding now. So since Head Start is a part of this continuum, you could have a decrease in Head Start that affects the overall, but we can still show where what we did made things better.
For this potential draft here, okay, assessment through expanded prenatal supports, strengthen pre-K program and collaboration with key partners, and increase access to stable childcare for Alice families. Why wouldn't those then be three separate goals?
They could be. I
They
think that
could
they're
be.
more, there's providing guidance to the strategies that would come under it. And it's just
Right.
kind of putting the caveats on it. So I think that you have your big SMART goal of what you want to do, and then the strategies that come underneath it to your point. And as you see, I'm taking notes as you're talking as it relates to Capillary Healthy Start, is that asset map of existing services in the catchment area, whatever you determine that to be, and determine the specific gaps. If that's a strategy that would have a deliverable associated with it. Then we have our outcomes, the short-term outcomes to get us to kindergarten readiness, right? Because we know that Healthy Start is never going to be able to report specifically on kindergarten readiness rates because it's 0-3, right? And so what are those short-term outcomes that have been mapped related to kindergarten readiness going back to when we first started this work and the pillars of the 5 pillars related to kindergarten readiness. So that's where, so I'm taking notes as you're speaking, that you had to Sika's point, you want to have a broad yet specific SMART goal as it relates to overall kindergarten readiness, and then we drill down in our strategies.
And before I go to Ms. Richards, this one of her statements that she made, would we not then consider versus saying Title I elementary schools? Because again, our I can't remember how long our SMART goals would last. I mean, they would change, they could change at some point. Why wouldn't we maybe then make a decision to focus on a particular 3 schools and within the title?
So we could. So for example, you could say in Title I elementary schools, and then part of that would be our data shows that we should be focusing on these three schools. So it's okay for this to be broad. The expectation is that we're going to hit all the Title I elementary schools. We would hit the ones that might need the assistance most as we go through looking at the data for each of those schools.
Go ahead, Ms. Richards.
So just this is me speaking from my prior experience as an ESC teacher. So like typically the SMART goal is the large goal that you're trying to reach, and in order to reach that you have to have objectives, and your objectives are the goals that you need to meet along the way to meet the top one. So in my head I'm thinking, and I think I got ahead of myself with the idea of looking at individual students, because I think that that's really probably hard in this space, because this space, like you said, is tracking so many different things. But I think this is where the objectives can come in handy. The objectives could be looking at each individual organization. So like in order for us to improve in kindergarten readiness, and we're funding these different organizations, those organizations have to meet they have to be doing something. They have to be moving the needle. There is an objective that can be measured there, and that doesn't make it a very specific goal. But if they're not meeting the objective, then we shouldn't be funding them, because then they're not moving the needle. And so I know that they are doing that. Like I know that these organizations are already doing that. I think we just need it in writing for us to be able to echo to the community that our goal was that this program would, I don't know, whatever it is, it would do this, and they did this, and they probably are doing that, and they probably have the data to show that. I think on our end, we just need to be reflecting that in the goal. So like our broad goal is, and I thought about this too, as Chairman Watts was saying, like specific schools. If we have, I know right now our objectives are like focused on the organizations that we're funding, but we also could be focusing in on the zip codes. So like if we're doing Title I elementary schools, but we're focusing on 32304 and 32304, this specifically is the objective that we're trying to reach. I like the idea of a broad goal It's very easy for people to understand. Um, and then the success rate of your objectives really are like setting the tone and you're looking at, and then you're saying, well, I'm not going to meet this goal by the end of the school year. I'm not going to meet this goal. I need to figure out, I'm going to meet this one. I've already met this one. I didn't meet this one. How do I pivot? And that, I mean, the point of the goal is the goals, these SMART goals and objectives is to guide our, our funding and guide our decision making. So we want the goals and objectives to be actually guiding that. We don't want just words on a paper that sound good and then we have the data to back it up. We want it to guide it. And so I know that a lot of these organizations are already doing a lot. Most of them are already tracking their goals. I think we just need to capture it in the objectives. And I think that the broad goal is a great idea, especially in this case. And with some of these different organizations, we'll really have to look at how they're tracking their data and use that to kind of piggyback off of. And we can set the standard that we want it to be, but like most of these, like you said, rebounding and recovery was tracking their data some way. And there are other ways that we could be looking at it to more streamline it, but some like the perinatal, that's very different than, looking at rebound and recovery as student in pre-K's assessment scores. Those two things are very different. So I also want to say, like, I really appreciate Holly and Sika, your work in this. I know that this is a huge task, and I can tell that you're like very attentively listening to us, Holly, and you're making edits as we go. And so I just appreciate y'all's work on this. This is not an easy feat, and you're getting it from all sides, I'm sure. So I appreciate you guys listening to the feedback and kind of pivoting as we go.
Yes, thank you so much for that. And we appreciate, because it's not easy concepts to try to capture. And that's why you all's expertise in these different areas help to inform this. And if I may further, Councilmember Richards, in every procurement, there are metrics. And so those metrics are the basement. So those are the minimum that we expect from the programs that we fund. And so when we go to contract, once we've done those let me back up. Once the evaluation teams have done those evaluations of those applications for a procurement, and they come back and say, this is what we recommend, you guys make that award, then in the contracting, and that's where Dina and her team comes in, it is very explicit. These are the metrics. These are the scope of work. This is this. And so when we come back to you and we have that red, yellow, green, we just recently did it with family supports. We have that red, yellow, green. Those are based on the metrics that they were supposed to achieve or supposed to work toward achieving, and if they were able to, all of the things. So to your point, each of those contracts have those metrics built in, and those metrics feed into the accomplishment of the goal, the SMART goal, that you all will draft, and then the council will ultimately approve.
Perfect.
So, do we have any other opinions on, do we feel like we're moving in a space where we want to make a decision on this potential draft goal here? That's like high level question, or are we in a different space?
And let me say that when you're looking at this goal, what we're trying to accomplish with this particular goal is to see a 5% increase in the kindergarten readiness rate in Title I elementary schools. And we could, to Councilmember Richards' point, we could say in select Title I elementary schools. And that allows us to pinpoint even more. And we want to do that by 2029. Let's look at that date. Let's make sure that's where we want to be. That would be 3 academic years from now. We want to see a 5% increase. Is that amenable? We have the superintendent here. Does that make sense? Is it too ambitious? Is it not ambitious enough? Should we take it to 2030? So these are the questions that should be swirling around in your heads as well as we get to what this draft goal is.
Go ahead, Council Member Johnson.
Yeah, I think directionally this makes a lot of sense, but when I think about kindergarten readiness, and I'm new to thinking about that, or it's been 35 years since I've had to focus on it under my roof. Uh, uh, but there's a continuum there of activities and objectives that happen over the course of 5 years that different of these agencies that are listed are doing different aspects of that. So, to me, it's collectively mapping, at least at a high level, where these various agencies are trying to focus in that continuum of conception to 5 when they get handed off to Leon County Schools or wherever they end up getting that education. And then we ought to know there's enough research independently on what are the critical factors across that continuum of 0 to 5 that we don't have to recreate that, but we need to know how are these participating agencies doing in their different aspects of it, so that we can get more targeted about uh, what investment we could either do new or an expansion of them to help move them so that that SMART goal, if we adopt it, of 5 percentage points at either select zips or school districts, because I like that direction, but it takes some diving down to say, well, what are the overarching goals of these different agencies that we know that are in that space? How are they doing in that specific piece or pieces that they contribute to in that 0 to 5 age cohort? And what do we know are the most effective levers to move an individual along in that space?
Agreed. And so if we go back, and you don't have to go back to the theory of change, Holly, but if we go back to the theory of change and we think about school readiness, success in school and life, kindergarten readiness is one of our areas under there. And then we go down to that third column where we talk about those key outcome measures. And like I said, those are just, so actually, Holly, I'm lying. Go back to the theory of change. See, you knew it. You read my mind. So when you talk about what you just said, Brent, and we're looking at and assessing our impact through under that purple, those are just maybe a fifth, Holly, of, is it even a fifth of the key outcome measures that feed into the accomplishment of being ready, success for school and life. So as we are looking at your SMART goal, we're looking at the partners. We are then looking at those key outcome measures and how they and which partners are kind of feeding into which ones of those. I know what I'm sounding is convoluted, but the quick answer to your question, Brent, is yes, that is what we would do. We would look at what they're hitting. If their outcomes are good, bad, indifferent, is there an opportunity for us to help them? Or is everybody doing the best they can do in that area? And we need to be looking at this particular gap. And this is the program we are suggesting, or the type of program we are suggesting that will influence the outcomes of each of those entities that are kind of in that space. So what Holly just pulled up, and it's kind of little for me, but I'm on my laptop. Let me
I'm trying, it's a PDF, so I'll also
Yeah.
drop it in the chat, the link to it.
So this was the map, if you will, for kindergarten readiness and the 5 areas that should be influenced in order to see an increase in the kindergarten readiness space. Our council previously decided that in the last column, the green column, when you talk about stable, decent, affordable housing, that wasn't our area. Like by statute, we can't really make sure that that's there. But what we can do is look at the stability piece. And that is how we got to the money that we are providing to fund the homelessness, to prevent homelessness in the 4 shelters of the 5 in our county that speak to families. So that is how we got to that. So that column for us has been handled and will be handled. The council decided they wanted us to specifically look at childcare and early education programs and early childhood curricula and interventions. I'm looking at interventions as an area for us to focus as we look at that goal for kindergarten readiness. The other 2 areas that we can look at effectuating or look at impacting would be workforce supports. This has been a conversation that has happened a lot because really the way you impact outcomes in early learning is you have to look at the workforce supports. And this is a conversation that goes on and on. And then the supports for expecting parents and families, we address that through our perinatal navigator program. So right now, where we are focusing is in those first 2 columns, understanding that at some point we may want to look at that 3rd column. But I think the goal is to adopt the SMART goal, the draft of the SMART goal, and then allow our team to look at that and come back to the council with propositions for funding that help to feed the goal or help to accomplish the goal, not feed the goal, but accomplish the goal.
Holly, can you go back to thank you, Sika and Councilmember Johnson. Can you go back to the draft you were typing in?
And just from a time perspective, we're
Yes.
at about 10:50.
Yes.
Almost there. There you go. And
All
I
right.
wasn't sure if you wanted to look at specific schools. And I can tell you if you're not able to see, these are specific Title I schools in red that are,
So,
if you
so
wanted
let
to.
me offer, I'm interrupting you on purpose, Holly. Let me offer that today is not the day to pick the schools. Today is the day to draft the goal, and then we can come back and allow us to come to you.
You froze on us, but I think you're back with us, and I agree with you on that piece there. I want to just, again, with what we currently have drafted here, I know you guys have proposed to others, but from this discussion, let me ask this from the group. Do we feel like we are leaning in an agreeable space with this draft that's on the screen right now?
Yeah, let me jump in real quick. I am, but we have to be careful about the 5 percentage points. I would probably move to 2030, and I would probably start with this year as the baseline. So you're going to 2 years ago, our kindergarten readiness numbers were at 53%. Now they're at 41 or 42%. And you say, oh my God, what the hell happened? Well, they changed the cut scores. So the cut score instead of 690 is now 704 or 710. But it's very misleading because you would think that we actually dropped 10 percentage points. The other thing that we have to ensure that we're doing is that we are administering this readiness test in a manner that gives the kids the best chance for success. Now, this test is administered on computers. You have 5-year-olds on computers, and so we have to ensure that the way we're measuring, their success, and not, without guiding them or helping them or whatever, is if they're struggling with the technology aspect of it, that doesn't necessarily mean that intellectually they're behind. They just struggled with the technology. So there's some things that we need to make sure we're cleaning up on our end and how we arrive at these scores. The first is the cut score, but I love it. I think it's great. I would also add to the partners the Florida Department of Education Early Learning Department. Their person is a Tallahassee kid, went to public schools. I'm drawing a blank on her name right now, but I think they could also be a partner with us locally. And then you have, as you all know, maybe 100 or more private providers that are in this space. So yeah, it's the players that you have listed, Holly, but there's also, whether it's Ainsworth Academy or Temple Israel or Scottsdale, or there's just all these private providers. But I think it's wonderful. I love it. You guys are probably sick and tired of hearing me say this, but I think it is, as far as a SMART goal, I think it's a great place. It's a smart place for us to start, and then moving forward, also like Mr. Watts said, I'm again the old football coach of the KISS theory. Keep it simple, stupid. I don't want to overthink or overanalyze. We just need to make sure what we're doing we can measure in a way. You can twist data 18 different ways to make a case for or against whatever you're trying to make a case for or against. We just want to make sure what we're doing is something that's really objective and measurable. But I think it's great.
We definitely want to be, thank you for that, Superintendent Hannah. We definitely want to be respectful of the time. With he brought up something with the 5 percentage points, because I noticed the other drafts, they were not proposing points. And I would say, there is a difference. So it is intentional that we want to use points instead of like how you have in the other ones with a percentage. I would just say make a determination, perhaps on that will be a recommendation. Then also too is you guys mentioned on here about the kindergarten readiness. Did we want to perhaps change the name? Maybe this ties into what Mr. Johnson was articulating, to a category just that school readiness that's a little bit more broad. Is that where you were going with that, Sika, in this document? I wasn't
Yeah,
sure.
that's where I was. Yeah, there were a couple of things that I had said to Vice Chair Watts that we might just want to consider. So do we want to stick with kindergarten readiness? Do we want to talk about school readiness? Because there's so much that goes into it. I think also Superintendent Hannah said we want to maybe look at 2030. So that gives us 5 years if we're using this as our baseline, our 20. So Superintendent Hannah, would we be using the 24-25 academic year as the basement? As the you know what I'm trying to say.
We can. I'd say, yeah, they're 24, 25. I think 25,
Okay.
26 just was released.
Okay.
We were
So
about where we were last year, honestly.
okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah, you could do either one. You could say 24, 25. Last year was the year that the cut scores changed. So you wouldn't want to go back any further than last year.
Got you. So we use that. We go to 2030. Listen, I'm gonna be honest with y'all. I don't know the difference between percentage and percentage points. So
I do. It's a pretty
I'm
big
not the
difference.
statistician on the staff. Holly is. So yeah. So we'll look at that as well.
One, okay, I have a proposal. So maybe you guys might not be able to agree on this right now, but they had proposed some other 2 drafts. This one is enough for, that's just in my opinion. I don't know that we need two other goals, but I want to open that up before we close, because if so, then I do have a proposal for them so we can conclude and have what the team can bring back for the next meeting. But just go back to the next slide, Holly. So they were proposing three potential draft goals. And my understanding is you don't necessarily need to have three. We want to have something that's meaningful. I think that the first one is, in my opinion, is enough, because keep in mind the next meetings we're going to be coming up with goals for those categories as well. But let me just pause real quick. If you guys feel comfortable giving an opinion, do you think we want to dive into more goals under right now called kindergarten readiness?
Well, one thing we want to be sure of that these goals are attainable. It's not going to look good for us to have goals and come up short. So we want to make sure we're setting ourselves up for success, not for failure. I don't know enough about how the percentage of low birth weights are measured. I don't know about how child and abuse and neglect. I mean, I don't know how those things are measured. But what we don't want to do is put ourselves in a box with all these different things, and because if we have three, we might get two of the three, but they're going to focus on the one we didn't. So I would probably make it. I think less is more, to be honest with you.
Any other opinions from the group members?
Yeah, I envisioned like one goal per category. I think we really need to focus in on, I mean, kindergarten readiness captures a lot, but I think we really need to be focusing in on being successful with what we're doing. And so I think let's echo Mr. Hannah's sentiment that we want to really make it measurable. So I think those objectives are really important, and I'm good with one goal per category.
And
All
Vice
right, I
Chair
saw a
Watts, if
head
I
nod
may.
from Councilmember Johnson, so in agreement, I think. So go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, I would just say, that kindergarten readiness is a continuum of roughly 0 to 5. And low birth weights, if that is, it seems like it's a component somewhere, a sub-objective under kindergarten readiness, because if your low birth weights end up making you disadvantaged for the continuum of getting to kindergarten readiness, it's almost and if somebody that knows this area says that's the absolute best measurement for getting them from 0 to 3 is healthy birth weight, then really what we are is we've got a macro goal of kindergarten readiness, and then there may be some sub goals underneath that. I had some other thoughts, but I can't go past 11 here. I've got hard stop, but I'm good with where we are, especially for the ground that we've covered in the first meeting.
Okay,
Perfect.
awesome.
So I asked that the team, Sika and team, if you guys could for the next meeting, redraft just the one goal here. If you see there's some opportunities, if we want to narrow down, maybe you don't need to say fast star assessment, maybe like there's an opportunity to just encompass some. Anyway, bring us back a proposed solid one goal for the next meeting, and we can spend some time just validating where we want to land on that one, and then we can be prepared to go ahead and dive into. I think the next one's going to be youth development deep dive, and so we'll be doing the same exercise for that one, with coming up with a smart goal for that topic. Anything else you want to add, Sika, Holly, or members?
No, this is perfect. I can't thank you guys enough for this. We absolutely will do that. We'll bring it back. We may even be able to put a few objectives under there so that it's very clear in the direction in which we're going. And we already have the next meeting on all of your calendars. Chair Jones has said he will join us for that next meeting, and we will also clarify about our other council member that we think may be on, but we've got a couple of differing opinions on that. So no, this is great.
All right, thank you. So with that, if we don't have any other comments, we will call this adjourned and everyone have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.